noticeable improvement in employment along with it. And as a result, what we saw was the unfortunate increase of the unemployment rate to 9.8%. The unemployment rate's a tricky number because it involves people who are actively looking for work, so it doesn't include those who've given up looking for work, those who are employed part-time for economic reasons, meaning that they would actually like to work full-time. When you broaden that measure, we've got something that's not quite twice that number of twice that percentage of Americans who are really struggling during this recession. So we know that times are tough. We know that we're on the road to recovery, but that it's not moving fast enough. And it's really in that context that we have this framework. So what we had, or what we may potentially still face, is with an unemployment rate of 9.8%, one thing that we know happened is last week the unemployment insurance extensions, which Congress had voted in starting in June of 2008 and had subsequently renewed, expired, which meant that those who had gone beyond their state unemployment system, which is for the first 26 weeks, that they were going to start to roll off of the federal expansions of those unemployment insurance benefits. You know, what we know is that we've got some net positive job growth. There are some jobs available, but what we've got is 4 to 5 unemployed workers for every job vacancy, which means it's going to take just that much longer for individuals to find a job. So in normal times, 26 weeks is a reasonable, that's a half a year, it's a reasonable amount of time for someone to find a job. But when you've got unemployment of 9.8%, you've got, and those normal times, the ratio of job seekers to job vacancies, by the way, is 1.5. And so now we're up to, I think it's 4.4 or 5. So we're in very tough economic times. So what we had last week, the unemployment insurance benefits expired for those who've been unemployed for longer. We know that overall, this coming month, we expect 2 million individuals will lose those unemployment insurance checks. And that if the year-long extension that the president has negotiated is not done, relative to no extension, another 7 million Americans will lose their unemployment insurance benefits. So what does that mean for those households? Well, an unemployment insurance benefit check is on average about $300 per week. It's on average about half of what that worker was earning beforehand. What we know is that those unemployed workers, about 14 million workers, have benefited from those unemployment expansions so far, and that has supported an additional 26 million members of their households. In 42% of households where there is an unemployment insurance recipient, in 42% of those households, that unemployment insurance recipient was the sole wage earner. In those households, that check is 90% of their household income. And so when that check stops, the family struggles that much harder to put food on the table, to pay the rent or mortgage, to buy other necessities. So not only is that a big hardship for the family, but what it also means for the businesses that they would otherwise spend that $300 on. Ordinarily, they would spend it buying food, et cetera, which means that those businesses can have economic activity and therefore keep their employment up. So unemployment insurance, Republicans and Democrats together economists agree on this. Unemployment insurance is the fastest way to stimulate economic growth. Just 2 weeks ago, the Department of Labor released a report that was commissioned by the Bush administration. So it was commissioned under a Republican administration, which talked about, the whole title was the stimulative effect of unemployment insurance benefits. And when they commissioned the report, the economic strategy for modeling was to simulate a recession, because this was commissioned before the recession started. And then guess what? They didn't have to simulate a recession. They actually had a real recession. And they confirmed that these expansions have generated millions of jobs. Last week, the Council of Economic Advisors issued a report on the economic impacts of an extension. And what we can estimate is relative to no year-long extension. If we have a year-long extension, next December there will be 600,000 additional jobs, and GDP growth will be about 0.6% faster. So not only is it important for those households, but it's important for all of us. So the president, knowing that was one of the most important aspects of this framework that he fought for, was that we went back, they expired, let's make it retroactive, and let's expand it for another 13, let's continue it for another 13 months. It's emergency spending. We believe it's emergency spending, because if we give you those unemployment insurance benefits, and then we pay for it, but which means we're taking back spending in another way, that's not helping. That actually is not what we would consider helping, adding a boost to the economy, because on net, there's no new money that's going into the economy. And so he fought for that, and he got it. It means we don't have to have this conversation for another year. In another year, we'll see where we are in terms of the economy and what we need. But we don't have to, the last extension was only for 3 or 6 months. And we've been sort of cobbling along these extensions, and it's a big fight every time. We have unemployment insurance for you. That was a very important part of the framework that the president brought. In addition, he preserved the Obama tax cuts from the Recovery Act, some of the most important for lower income and middle income families. So that includes the earned income tax credit. So in the Recovery Act, it was the marriage penalty was reduced, and it was expanded to families with 3 or more children. So he preserved those expansions in the EITC in this framework. In addition, the Recovery Act made the child tax credit more accessible to lower income families. So the child tax credits were fundable, but you had to have at least $12,500 worth of income in order to be able to receive any credit. It was lowered to $3,000 in the Recovery Act. And so that expansion of the child tax credit, which is also refundable, meaning that even for those individuals, lower individuals that don't owe a lot of money, they can benefit from the child tax credit. They were going to benefit as well. And that child tax credit is $1,000 per child. In addition, he preserved the American Opportunity Tax Credit, which is also partially fundable, meaning, again, even if your tax liability is less than the amount of the credit, which is $2,500, you can benefit. So the American Opportunity Tax Credit is $2,500 towards college tuition for up to 4 years, meaning it's worth $10,000 over 4 years. Last year, 8 million families and students benefited from this tax credit. So it's so important, especially now that we know during a recession, what a better, it's so important for our young people to be going back to school, and for older people who, were in the labor force, have been laid off, they can benefit from this tax credit as well. This is important not just for right now. We don't want to raise the taxes on these individuals now by taking away this tax credit, but we know that for our long-term growth and competitiveness, we need people going to college. We need them to get the skills that we're going to need to compete. So that was very important to the president. There was another surprise sweetener in here as well, which is the 2% payroll tax holiday. So what this means is ordinarily an individual, 6.2% of his or her check goes to the Social Security Administration to help pay for Social Security, medical, et cetera. But that has been for the next year, that was reduced to 4.2%. This means that starting with their first paycheck in January, Americans will see on average, it adds up to about $1,000 on average for the year, but they're going to immediately notice an increase in their paycheck for next year. So again, this is an important boost for the economy, and it will be very helpful for Americans. That's actually a tax cut. Many people have worried that means that we're not adding those revenues to Social Security, which will weaken Social Security. The way this is structured is that it's true that your employer is not going to send money from your paycheck to Social Security, but each dollar that doesn't go from you to Social Security will go from the general trust, and instead families can keep their $1,000 over the year. So that was hugely important. And there were some other things that the 100% business expensing, which means that if we're going to have economic growth, we know we're going to have to rely on businesses to be generating economic activity. So we fought for that was something the president had wanted this fall. We never thought we would get it. However, he fought for it to be included in this package. And then he also included the 1603 manufacturing tax credits, which is for energy investments. That's included as well. So when we look at the balance of what the president gave up in terms of fighting against letting that high income tax credits expire, and also having a weaker estate tax than the president would like, he does not like those provisions. But in the spirit of compromise, he accepted them. So if you think about those being the Republican wins, it adds up to about $114 billion. And if you weigh that against what the president fought for and included in that list that I just included for you, that adds up to about $238 billion. So from the administration's perspective, we believe that we really fought for and won a good, it was a good fight, and that we actually came out ahead. And the reason why I wanted to say that this reflects the president's priorities is, it's painful for him to accept the idea that the high income tax credit not expiring. It's a very expensive tax cut. High income earners, while there's a little bit of stimulus because it is money that's going from the federal government into the economy, at least into individuals, high income individuals are more likely to save that money, as opposed to the unemployment insurance, where those individuals spend the money because they have to. They don't have any other source of revenue. They have to spend the money. So the high income tax credit, so while the unemployment insurance is going to help us with our short-term growth, the high income tax credits don't help us in the short term, in that they still are going to add a bit into the deficit in the long term. And so, but on that, we think we did